Hey there, amazing friends. I warmly invite you to join me on this exciting journey by subscribing to my channel, liking, commenting, and sharing my videos. Every like, comment, and share brings us closer together and fuels my passion to create more great content. Your support truly makes all the difference. Thank you for being the heart of this community. They arrived with thunder. Eyewitness tales from the world's loudest UFO encounter. The warm August day began as countless others in Greenville County had, marked by the gentle hum of cicadas and the drifting scent of cut hay in the fields. Throughout the rural expanse, from the edges of the thick pine forests to the clear waterways that snaked among gently rolling hills, life moved unhurriedly. The farmers checked on their livestock under a bold, sweltering sun. Families settled in for a calm weekend routine, and children bounded along dusty roads on their way to the local creek. Little did anyone suspect that by nightfall, this calm existence would be shattered by an auditory onslaught unlike anything they had experienced before, an inexplicable, thunderous roar that signaled the arrival of something both wondrous and terrifying. A series of unidentified flying objects that soared overhead with earth-shaking ferocity. It started in the late afternoon with no warning, no leading edge of a coming storm. The sky itself offered only faint cloud cover, painted a typical hazy summer hue, yet the first boom rattled windows around 5 o'clock. Residents described it as a thunderclap multiplied 100-fold. A deep, rolling detonation that spread across the valley in powerful waves, jarring both nerves and farmland. Animals scattered in startled confusion, cows bellowed in alarm, dogs barked at the sky, and birds fled their usual perches. Many people rushed outdoors, scanning for storm clouds or perhaps some kind of freak atmospheric anomaly. Yet the sun remained unobscured, and no tornado sirens rang out. The only clue was the lingering sense that this thunder, so resonant and extended, did not belong to natural weather. In a matter of minutes, rumors ignited across the county. Perhaps it was an earthquake, a gas explosion, or a jet from the nearby Air Force Base testing supersonic speeds. But the Air Force Base lay more than 100 miles away, and no contrails or jets dotted the skyline. The local sheriff's office fielded a barrage of frantic calls from all corners of Greenville, with residents stammering about how their houses had shaken as though a bomb had dropped. Then came the second rumble, shorter, more staccato, but still unbelievably loud, jarring the air with such force that old barns swayed and dust rose from the roads. Some in the northern hamlets claimed to see flickers of light dancing along the horizon, almost like miniature lightning, though the skies overhead stayed mostly clear. Among the first to get a direct view of the phenomenon was a retiree named Wayne Wilcox, who lived near the base of the valley on a modest patch of farmland. Wayne, a widower in his 60s, had recently taken to evening walks down his gravel lane to manage his arthritic knees. On hearing the first colossal boom, he grabbed his binoculars and ambled outdoors, wondering if some catastrophic accident had occurred. Shielding his eyes from the sun's last rays, he scanned the horizon. About half a mile away, between the cornstalks and an old line of oaks, he saw an odd glimmer in the sky, like a curved metallic surface that caught the light at an angle. For a moment, he thought it could be a large drone or a helicopter with a reflective fuselage, but it moved at a slow, almost hovering pace, then shot sideways with startling acceleration. Then came another thunderous roar so immense that Wayne pressed his hands over his ears and nearly dropped to a knee, eyes wide in shock. By the time he steadied himself and looked up again, the object had zipped beyond the next ridge, leaving behind a faint, swirling ripple in the air. Wayne's immediate conclusion was that this had to be some advanced aircraft or a secret government test, though no typical engine sound followed. Instead, the air thrummed in the aftermath, carrying a faint electric tingle that tickled the skin. Wayne retreated inside to call the sheriff, stammering out his story about a shimmering oval craft moving across the fields, accompanied by unimaginable thunder. It was a frantic account, but he was hardly the first or last to report it that evening. In a different part of Greenville County, siblings Rita and Bobby Henderson were laying out their telescope for an evening of backyard stargazing. Both in their 20s, they had a shared passion for astronomy that they nurtured by scanning the night sky for Saturn or Jupiter when the conditions were right. Their family farm, situated in a clearing with little light pollution, was perfect for it. As they assembled the telescope, the first explosive rumble hammered the air, shattering their concentration. Bobby felt the impact reverberate in his chest as though he stood next to a bass speaker at a rock concert. Startled, they scrambled to see what might be happening. The sky above them remained a soft peach color from the setting sun, but near the southwestern horizon, an elongated shape zipped by in a silent arc. Another roar tore through the atmosphere, this one briefer, but equally intense, and the shape pivoted upward at an impossible angle. Through a pair of binoculars, Rita glimpsed a brilliant halo of greenish light around the object's edges, pulsing irregularly. She shouted for Bobby to pivot the telescope that way, but the craft moved too fast, vanishing before they could align. They did, however, snap a couple of fleeting phone pictures that turned out as blurred streaks of light and faint smudges. Both siblings were left breathless, hearts hammering in awe and confusion at the notion that something so advanced or so unearthly had darted across the sky with earth-shaking power. All across the county, variations of these experiences multiplied. Some saw bright orbs dancing in formation, others perceived a single disk that seemed to split into multiple smaller lights. A few, shaken by the thunderous booms, retreated to their basements or tried to corral frightened animals that wandered in a daze. By 8:30, local radio stations scrambled to gather eyewitness testimonies on air. Hosts joked nervously about close encounters of the Greenville kind, but the undercurrent of tension was tangible. By the hour's end, phone lines were jammed with callers claiming to hear more roars or see luminous shapes making impossible maneuvers overhead. Even the typically skeptical station manager admitted on air that he had seen something extraordinary, a massive, low-flying silhouette sliding behind the tree line while emitting a guttural hum, followed by a thunderclap that rattled the broadcast equipment. The local sheriff, Harold Nolan, tried to coordinate a response. He dispatched patrol cars to vantage points along state roads and farmland routes, hoping the deputies might locate or identify the source of the disturbance. However, the phenomenon remained elusive. Whenever a deputy arrived at a suspected location, the lights or crafts had moved on. Some patrollers reported hearing the tail end of the roaring sounds, describing it as if a sonic wave rolled across the farmland, bouncing off the hills. A few glimpsed streaks of color overhead, but the sightings were too brief to draw definite conclusions. One chilling detail was the effect the thunderous booms had on animals. Multiple farmers found their horses and cows trembling, ears flattened, eyes wide with primal fear. Chickens scattered from the coops, refusing to return even after hours. A half-dozen goats apparently broke through their pen in a frantic scramble, found the next morning a mile down the road in a neighbor's field, panting and disoriented. More curious still, at least one farmer claimed some of his animals vanished altogether, 2 sheep unaccounted for, with no sign of fence damage or predator tracks. Rumors of abductions circulated, fueling speculation that these UFOs might be up to more than mere FLYBs. Nights wore on, and the phenomenon persisted. While no single display matched the initial onslaught of roars, multiple smaller encounters occurred. Residents described sudden overhead thunders, though milder, followed by sightings of orbs or disks in the sky. Strange luminous trails, reminiscent of auroras but localized, glowed above certain tree lines. The question of who or what was behind these events spawned a bevy of theories. Some insisted it was an advanced military test, a new generation of aircraft using experimental propulsion that created these sonic quakes. Others believed wholeheartedly in extraterrestrials making a grand but cryptic appearance, using thunder as an intentional show of force or caution. The more conspiratorial among them pointed to a sinister alliance between shadowy government forces and alien visitors, or perhaps an interdimensional rift that opened momentarily to allow these crafts to slip into Earth's reality. Amid the swirl of rumor, a local professor of atmospheric physics, Dr. Emily Bauer, tried to remain level-headed. Interviewed by a small local TV outlet, she explained that under normal meteorological or aerospace circumstances, generating thunder without an actual storm or a conventional sonic boom from supersonic jets was highly improbable. The consistent reports of craft moving in silent glides, only to produce deafening roars in intense bursts, defied standard aeronautical patterns. She mused that if there was technology behind this, it was something far beyond known propulsion systems. The possibility that these were not terrestrial machines at all crept into her remarks, though she stopped short of labeling them definitively as UFOs. Her stance was simply that the phenomenon did not correspond to anything recorded in typical atmospheric or aerospace data. Then came a twist. Approximately a week into the sightings, Deputy Officer Corey Franklin claimed to spot two black helicopters, unmarked, flying low at dawn, cruising along the county's ridge. The watchers who lived near that ridge also reported hearing them pass overhead, though they had no official flight records or transponder signals. Some recalled seeing men in dark suits at a local diner the next day, quietly asking questions about the lights in the sky. None of this was conclusive evidence of a government cover-up, but it fanned the flames of suspicion that the phenomenon had drawn official attention. Soon, more sightings of black vehicles parked along rural roads at odd hours were whispered about, with no license plates visible. For those who already believed in conspiracies, it was enough to confirm that higher powers were investigating behind the scenes, perhaps intercepting any definitive proof of the thunderous UFOs. One bizarre incident involved a group of 5 teens who, out for an adventurous drive on a remote stretch, were startled by a bright beam shining down onto their pickup truck from a silent craft hovering about 60 feet above the roadside. The object, enveloped in a faint green glow, seemed to track them as they slowed to a halt. A thunder-like crack accompanied by a heavy rush of air forced them to duck. Then, as if satisfied, the craft swooped away. The teens described feeling a momentary tingle, like static electricity passing through them. Their phone cameras only captured a smear of emerald light. While physically unhurt, they remained jittery for days, retelling the story of how they nearly came face to face with an unearthly presence. Local media repeated their account, and parents fretted over what might happen if the UFO phenomenon turned more aggressive. The cycle of events continued for the better part of a month. Each new wave of sightings was slightly less spectacular than the last, fewer booms, shorter appearances. The crafts or lights would flicker among the clouds for a few minutes, emit a truncated roar, and then vanish before any helicopter or team of watchers arrived. Investigators from surrounding counties or small private research groups set up vantage points on hills, armed with high-zoom lenses, hoping to capture conclusive images. They recorded distant points of light. Some soared in arcs impossible for planes. But the resolution was too low, the footage too inconclusive to dispel critics' doubts or confirm believers' convictions. Still, the unifying factor in every eyewitness tale remained that monstrous noise, likened to supernatural thunder or a sonic barrage. Some described it as a pressure wave that rattled entire buildings. Others called it rolling thunder multiplied by 10, lasting far longer than typical thunderclaps. The effect on animals was always pronounced, with deer and smaller wildlife seen racing away in frantic herds as though spooked by a predator. The phenomenon left the impression that the UFO presence was not passive, but accompanied by some potent energy discharge, the purpose of which was anyone's guess. As time wore on, speculation swirled, but no definitive resolution emerged. The black helicopters' sightings dwindled, and whatever official interest might have existed seemed to recede without public acknowledgement. The local sheriff's official report ended up as a mild statement: unexplained aerial disturbances accompanied by audible anomalies, and no injuries or property damage beyond minor livestock disruptions. A collective memory formed among the county's residents, preserving the authenticity of those nights when unstoppable thunder shook their fields and luminous shapes roamed overhead. They arrived with thunder, folks would say, around bonfires and at local taverns, describing how the sky once roared in ways that nature never had, how the horizon lit up with color, not from storms or fireworks, but from impossibly agile craft that soared across the farmland like watchers from another world. Eventually, the phenomenon ceased. The roars subsided, the sightings stopped. Greenville County returned to its tranquil rhythms: farming, Sunday gatherings, high school football, and the mundane passing of seasons. But the impact of that summer's encounters lingered, shaping local folklore and forging a bond among those who shared the experience. Some even believed their perspective on life had changed. "We know now," they would say, "that something bigger is out there, something able to roll thunder through the sky without storms." Others merely shrugged, focusing on daily chores and dismissing the entire affair as a passing mania. Yet the stories, layered with sincerity, lived on. Occasionally, outsiders visited the area to interview the eyewitnesses, expecting sensational claims. They found, instead, measured accounts. "Yes, the craft were real," said Wayne Wilcox. "They were huge and soared without a normal engine sound, except for that catastrophic roar that came in pulses." Or from Rita Henderson, who retold how she felt her eardrums rattle and saw swirling distortions behind the craft silhouette. "The truth is," she said, "we had encounters that changed how we look at the night sky. There's more out there than we can explain." Over time, the old fear mellowed into an almost reverent awe. Thus, the collective memory of the county anchored itself around that singular phrase: "They arrived with thunder." It was a matter-of-fact statement that carried with it all the wonder, confusion, and surreal potency of those nights. Every generation born afterward heard the stories from parents or grandparents, often by lamplight or under the broad starlit canopy. A hush would fall over the living room or campsite as an elder recounted the thunder that was no storm, the lightning that roared without rain, and the shimmering crafts that defied the laws of earthly flight. The children would huddle close, half enthralled, half terrified, knowing that they lived in a place touched by the unknowable. Even decades later, scientists occasionally swung by to measure residual anomalies in the soil or to analyze accounts of missing livestock. They rarely found anything conclusive, but they did note an unusual incidence of microchanges in the local electromagnetic field recorded around that time. The cause, of course, remained unknown. Amateur UFO groups recognized Greenville County as a minor hotspot of UFO lore, overshadowed by more famous places, yet revered for the bizarre phenomenon of soundquake craft. A few wrote blog posts or self-published books with titles like Thunder from the Sky, Alien Visits in Rural America. Although they gleaned few new details, these authors preserved the accounts so they might endure for posterity. For the people of Greenville themselves, the night sky wonder occasionally revived, not in repeated sightings, but in vivid memory. They spoke calmly about how the phenomenon had, for a brief month or so, woven their community together in shared awe. Differences in politics, religion, or background softened in the face of the cosmic riddle that shook them all. And in remembering, they felt a semblance of that raw humility once more, a humility that arises when confronted with an event that expands your sense of reality, that unsettles your tidy worldview, leaving in its wake both fear and admiration for what might lie beyond. The farmland eventually enveloped the final traces of scorched circles or footprints that skeptics had dismissed. The roads became dusty again, traveled by tractors and pickup trucks, absent the swirling dust kicked up by frantic watchers and out-of-town investigators. The nights grew quiet once more, with only the usual insect choir and the rustle of nocturnal wildlife. Yet, for the generation who bore witness to that wave of thunder and impossible lights, the memory stayed. On cool summer evenings, as the stars glimmered overhead, they might feel a subtle tremor in the air, a recollection more than a current event, and wonder if these visitors would ever return, carried by yet another thunderous roar. Meanwhile, the cosmic question lingered unanswered. Who wore what sword across their county's fields, so confident and unannounced, with a thunder that rattled souls as effectively as it rattled the windows? In the end, the tale left behind a single iconic phrase that held the entire experience in its grasp. They arrived with thunder. Short, powerful, and packed with the sense of awe that those nights evoked. It served as both a testimonial and a warning, an encapsulation of the extraordinary that erupted in the midst of ordinary farmland. For those who lived through it, no day goes by that they don't recall, at least in quiet reflection, the roars that permeated the humid night air, the luminous shapes that drifted overhead, and the sinking feeling that, for a brief moment, humanity's comfortable illusions were shattered by a cosmic performance of unimaginable scale. And so, the final legacy of Greenville County's strangest summer endures in the memories of those who heard thunder from a cloudless sky and saw lights that defied explanation, bridging the realm of the mundane with that of the infinite unknown.